Hello artists, your first job is to draw a koi fish or multiple koi fish. There are a video link and some drawing directions you can follow. I'm going to talk you through this type of drawing of a koi fish. This I would call the most simple, a little trickier, and then the video is the most advanced. So let's start with our paper tall or wide, however you want. I'm going to start with a swoop, just a curved line. This is going to be one of my koi fish. I'm going to curve that around. So now I have added, let's see if I can back up a little. There we go. I have drawn one swoop and then sort of like a little C stuck to it. I'm going to bring this curve so that it meets the end. And now we've kind of made this little point. I'm going to draw another koi fish, like a smaller one over here. I'm going to do it the same way with a curve and then that little C to bring them back together. So those are the basic body shapes of the koi fish. Let's add some triangle tail shapes. I'm drawing a curve and then another curve so that it's not really straight sides on my triangle. It's more like curved sides on my triangle. Let's do the same thing over here. Give them a tail. All right, let's look back to our directions. Okay, we got tails. Let's add some fins. Okay, so in like the middle part of our koi's body, we'll add some little fins, which are kind of like another triangle-ish shape. It's easier for me to turn my paper, you may have noticed, to add these different parts of our koi fish. Since we're looking from above, we're going to draw the little fin on top. So that's going to be a straight line and then like a little bit of a wavy line for the other side of that top fin. So curved line, it's straight, and then kind of a bumpier line. Since we're looking from above, again, that's going to change how we see our koi's features. So I'm going to start with two curved lines and then draw a smaller curved line inside of that first curve. So it's kind of like these little rainbows for my koi's eyes. I think that might be all I want to add for right now, since we're going to be painting. In the examples, they drew a little bit of seaweed. I'm just going to let this be. So that's drawing our koi. Now let's talk about painting. All right, I got my watercolors ready to go. You, of course, need water and your paints. I'm going to make sure my brush is super clean. And the first line I'm going to do after my brush is wet and I tickle this paint is I'm going to very carefully outline the shape of this fish. I'm going to talk about some different ideas for how to paint this fish, but we are going to paint the fish first. You may use whatever colors you like. I am choosing orange, of course, but you could choose anything else. But first, let's just outline the shape we're going to paint in. We're going to wait to paint the water until this is dry so that we can make sure nothing bleeds together where we don't want it to. Okay, so now I have an outline of my basic shape of my fish. Let's talk about some ideas for adding color to your fish. So I'm going to make a little wet area of color, clean my brush, grab another color, and I'm going to show you wet on wet. Wet on wet is meaning that you have a wet area of color and you put some wet paint on top of it to make sort of we call it that the paint's bleeding together. So I'm going to kind of pull that color out a little bit so it's starting to blend. That's one way you could add color to your koi fish, right? I wouldn't try to add too many different ways within each fish. Maybe like finish this one with wet on wet and try something different for the other guy. Another idea is that you could layer color. So I'm going to first we'll do this guy with a layer. Maybe I'll start with a different color. Okay, let's say this guy is going to be a green fish. So I'm going to layer color for him. I'm going to start by just painting in, just like before, this little layer of color. So layering means we're putting one on top of another. But the difference in layering and wet on wet is that when we layer, we're going to let our colors dry in between. So I'm going to have to let this sit for a little bit, and then we'll come back to it once it's dry, and we'll put another color on top. So let's talk about another idea for adding color to your koi. I'm going to keep working on this koi. I'm just going to keep blending out this red. I'm going to go over my fin, and then I can layer color on top of it later. Something else I want to show you is sometimes called splatter, but I'm going to call it freckles. hopefully that will make sure we don't get too out of control. I'm going to get a clean brush, and then with a very wet, clean brush, I'm just going to kind of gently tap my brush. And what that does is it's going to make little white freckles on top of my koi. I'll see if I can zoom in without messing up my camera. So you can see that sort of has a different effect too. So I'm going to pause and finish painting this koi in with some different colors, and then I'll show you layering. All right, artists, you can see I've started to fill in my first koi fish. There are some puddles, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of that color with my paper towel because I don't want puddles to drip anywhere I don't want them to go. I want to remind you something that I was not very patient with, and I should have been. In this eyeball, I decided I want to start to paint my dark colors now, but the orange is still wet. What I did was I went ahead and painted it, and then what happens is because this is wet and that was wet, it all sort of blended together, which is not what I want. I want my areas to stay really nice and clean. So don't do what I did there. Wait. And then once this is dry in this orange, then come back for your other colors, which is kind of what I'm going to show you now with our layering. So I added some green earlier, and that is dry now. So I'm going to come back and add another layer of color. I think I want to make sure I don't have too wet of a brush. I'm going to add another layer of green with little like scales, I guess, kind of just a little tiny little brush stroke. I'm going to go underneath where I painted too, just to give it a little bit different look. Now, of course, you could always layer a different color too. I'm going to clean my brush and do that maybe with some yellow. We'll see how yellow looks on top of the green. Well, I really like the yellow. You probably can't see it too well on the camera, but I really like the yellow. So I'm going to finish these fish with some layering, and I'm going to wait for this to dry and then paint that eyeball, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, artists, I just want to show you what to do when you are not patient and you get color where you don't want it. I'm going to use my paper towel to just like gently tap where my color is that I don't want it to be. And then I'm going to pick up some of that color. We don't want to move it around. We just kind of want to dip the corner of our paper towel in it to kind of suck up some of that color. So then we can be patient and wait for it to dry to re-add color. We just want to do the koi fish today for that same reason that next time we'll add some beautiful blue water. All right, so make sure you use some different techniques like wet on wet or splatter freckles or layering to paint neatly without puddles for your two koi fish.